Welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast. Today, we're going to Imaging USA. So let's get into it.
Welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast, a weekly podcast for those who believe that moments matter most and that a beautiful photo is more than just a sum of its settings. A show for those who want to do more with the gear they have to take better photos today. And now, your host, Raymond Hatfield.
Welcome to this episode of the Beginner Photography Podcast. As always, I am Raymond Hatfield. I'm your host. And today we got a really special show lined up because it's something that I have never done before. So, as I'm sure many of you know, there are a lot of photography conferences that go on across the country and even around the world. But here in the US, there's a few that are most notable, some of the largest, and one of them is put on by the Professional Photographers Association of America, which is called Imaging USA. And Imaging USA is several days of in-person education, keynote speakers, lots of get-togethers, meetups, as well as a very extensive and large trade show floor where there's a lot of new vendors, including Fujifilm, which I was super excited to see there, and other vendors who, you can find cool new photography things. But one thing, now, I've said this on the show before, that I've never been to a photography convention before, and I was invited to go down to Imaging USA to check it out, and I am so glad that I did. Which I will talk to you more about some of the reasons after the end of this. But I gotta say, it was so much fun. It was so much fun. And if you get the chance to go to a photography convention, no matter what your skill level is, just go and observe. Try to talk to people. Like, that's where the real meat of this thing is meeting with and networking with other photographers. But if you just want to go and just observe, your first year, just go and observe your first year. There's no harm in that. So it is a ton of fun. So before we get on into today's interviews, that's right, little teaser right there. I want to talk about something that if you are in the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group, at least there's a good chance that you know about. So a few weeks ago, I had, let me start over. Before, I had a guest on the show who had come on, and they were extremely helpful with the information that they shared. They seemed to be completely genuine in everything that it was that they talked about, and they were very candid when it came to their business and how things ran, which was very unique and very interesting, that I thought could be helpful, for you as the listeners to see this different perspective on how a business could be ran. So a few weeks ago, I asked her to come back onto the show. I invited them back onto the show to come on and give us an update, talk about the new things that were going on in their lives and their photography business. So they came on the show, and honestly, it blew me away. I mean, the amount of information and new ideas and new tips that they shared was incredible. And some of those things I took and will implement into my business. They were that helpful, and something that I, typically wouldn't have thought of. Well, after I had recorded the interview, this photographer had said, I found out through some messages that were sent to me, said a few unsavory things about beginning photographers in another group. And it was really disheartening, because the interview that we had together it felt very open, it felt very honest, and I don't feel like this person is a malicious person. I don't feel like they would go out of their way to do something harmful to other photographers who are just starting out, in their business. But the things that they said made me stop, and it made me wonder, what do I do now? What do I do now? Because on one hand, the interview that we had together would help a good deal of, new photographers. But on the other hand, they said things that many would see and did see as bullying towards other new photographers. And like I said, I was faced with this decision as far as what to do. What what's the right decision here? Because the things that were said, I didn't feel, it just didn't make sense that this is who that person is. It felt as if maybe it came from a place of anger, or I don't know. I always want to give everybody the benefit of the doubt, and maybe I did a little too much of that here. But ultimately, I have decided to pull that interview for a few reasons. One, I want you to know that me, I host the show, and I get a lot of comments that it's very weird, because I get looked at as an expert in photography. And I'm maybe a few steps ahead of you, but I'm by no means an expert. I am not a master of photography. There are still things that I learn every single day, right? And being looked at as this position of authority is weird, because I'm not the judge and jury of a person's character. And I've always been the kind of person to take in all the information, regardless of where it came from, and potentially whatever the intent is. And I take that information, and then I decide what I feel is right for me and what is not right for me. So in this interview, now I'm faced with the decision of, do I share information that can be helpful to new photographers, while at the same time giving somebody a platform who has said negative things about new photographers? So again, I was torn. I've been very torn. It's been weighing very heavy on my mind. And I didn't know what to do. So I asked, you people, you beautiful, beautiful people, the community of the Beginner Photography Podcast, as far as your input and what it is that I should do. And as I said, I ultimately decided to pull the interview. And I think here's the reason why. I decided to pull the interview because even though I have to be an unbiased party here, I have to be an unbiased party, right? I'm not a pet photographer. I'm not a landscape photographer. I'm not a real estate photographer. But I try to still get that information and then give it to you in the form of the questions that I ask. So therefore, I am your advocate. I'm here because I want to see you succeed. And here's this person that came along, and there's nothing wrong with wanting the tallest building in town, but I don't believe that you should have the tallest building in town by tearing down other people's buildings. If you want the tallest building in town, you build the tallest building in town. And I don't believe that this photographer followed those guidelines. I believe that they tried to have the tallest building in town by knocking down others' buildings. And because I am your advocate, I ultimately decided to pull the interview. So that's what happened this week. There was a lot going on, and I know that this sounds kind of cryptic, but what I'm trying to get at here is that in the world of photography, there's plenty of times when you're behind the keyboard or when you're on the internet, it can feel like, wow, this is a very dangerous place. There's a lot of negativity. There's a lot of people who just want to destroy me because they're looking out for themselves. And this couldn't have been at a worse timing, because I had just got back from Imaging USA, where there was thousands of fellow photographers there, and not once. I probably talked to close to 100 people. And out of those 100 people, I found that people were very open. They were very honest. They wanted to help. They wanted to see this industry that we are in grow. And it didn't matter. There seemed to be no competition in this place when you're face to face with somebody. And there's something so refreshing about that. But then to come back and then see this was, very, very strange. It was a mix of emotions there. But as I said, ultimately, I've decided to pull that interview. And today, what I want to share with you are the interviews that I recorded at Imaging USA. So I reached out to, some past guests of the podcast, some new friends that I met while I was there, and I asked them all the same 5 questions. And this is kind of wrapping it all together. I asked them the same 5 questions, all 5 of these photographers. There's headshot photographers, there's family photographers, wedding photographers, there's the whole gamut of photographers. There's even, photography business coaches. And I asked them the same 5 questions because they all have a different mindset and they all come at things a little bit differently, and to hear their ideas on the same exact subject is what is refreshing, and what I love so much about this industry is that there's no one right or wrong answer. There is a gray area here, and what I learned is that being here in front of these people, there was no maliciousness. It was all genuine, and it was just trying to be helpful. So today I'm replacing the interview that was supposed to come out today with this episode of Imaging, where you are going to be able to hear from these just fantastic people, fantastic humans who at their core don't care about competition, because they realize that there's no real competition and that you are the only person who can build the tallest building in town. And that's all that it is. So today, this is what you get to listen to. As I said, I met up with 6 photographers. I met up with many photographers, but 6 photographers I had recorded interviews with, which, by the way, I mean, you should have saw this rig that I had going on. It was just me. I was recording video, I was recording audio, 2 separate channels. It was, in the middle of an expo floor. It was a mess. So what you are about to listen to, I hope that you can look past the audio issues. Because again, I am not an audio engineer, and this episode we recorded in a lot of different locations, whether it was an empty room or behind a backdrop trying to block out some sounds, or if it was in the middle of the expo floor. There is a lot of different audio issues, I guess is the best way to put it, and I hope that you can look past that and really soak in the information that you're about to learn, because it is a lot. So we're going to go ahead and get on into this first interview of the 6 right now with Vanessa Joy. So let's just start off with, get that going that way, who you are and what it is that you shoot.
I'm Vanessa Joy. I'm a wedding photographer based in New Jersey, New York area.
So with all the photographers that are kind of getting into photography today, there's a lot of new technology. What do you think photographers spend too much of their time and focus on?
I think photographers spend way too much time holding a mouse and not a camera. If you get your skill right in camera, you can do what you want to do, which is take pictures, at least I think. Maybe you want to do Photoshop for the rest of your life, and that's fine. But if we're talking to photographers, learn how to do it in camera.
Learn how to do it in camera. Perfect. So as somebody who's been in business as long as you have, how long have you been in business?
My business is 12 years old.
12 years old, okay.
Yeah.
So in that time, why do you think you've been able to kind of break past that $75 or $100 barrier that so many new photographers can't seem to do?
Oh man, that's a really good question. All right. I've been in business for the past 12 years, and when I started, I was definitely scared of making money or charging money or even saying a dollar amount to my clients. And just like most things, I simply decided that I was going to do something and did it, and made sure that it didn't cringe. Because when you're talking about price, if you cringe, your clients will cringe, and then they probably won't pay it. So say your price, straight face. I charge $2,000 for a wedding. That's it.
Jeez. You make it sound so easy.
It's not easy at all, but you just do it anyway. You just decide to and you do it.
Yeah. If you were to move, say, to California, say Los Angeles, what would you do tomorrow to get your first client or just start to get bookings?
If I were to move out of my area, which I probably will never do because it's the wedding mecca of the world, but if I did, and I'd probably go to Southern California, the first thing I would do to get clients is to immerse myself in the wedding industry there. Find people to network with, wedding planners, hairstylists, florists, anything to get me really rooted in the group. Because even my business here, the first 2 jobs I got were from other wedding vendors. So I would start there, find myself a little group, and pray a lot.
That's like old school. That's like,
oh yeah,
for like go meet with people. I love that because not a lot of people are going to want to do that.
That's right. That's exactly it. And that's why it works, because not everyone's going to do it.
Right. Okay. I love that. Okay, second to last question here for you. With cell phones that have like amazing cameras, with computational photography and like AI, what do you think the future holds for photographers, and how can they stand out?
Everyone complains that photography is oversaturated and, people with iPhones can do the jobs of photographers. But if you actually want to do this as a career, you need to treat it like a career and find a way to rise above. There's always going to be a Christian Louis Vuitton shoe and a Payless shoe source. Actually, I take that back. Payless went out of business. So your job is to figure out how to become the Christian Louis Vuitton of photographers, because ultimately they're not paying you for that little snap, snap, snap. They're paying you for the entire experience. Find a way to be an experience.
Oh, wow. That was like a masterclass right there, that answer. Jeez, so good. Okay, last question for you is, what do you love so much about coming to conferences and imaging in particular?
Coming to conferences has been a favorite thing to do of mine for a very long time. I feel like I just skip through the aisles of this trade show floor and it's like a kid in a candy store. But ultimately, I like to come here. I get to see all my friends. It's a huge family reunion. And if you've never been to one, don't worry, I promise you will make friends and then you will never miss that conference again because you just have to go back.
So just briefly start, just let me know who you are and what it is that you do.
Yeah, Bernie Griffiths, international photography business coach.
Okay, so there's a lot of new photographers obviously getting into photography right now. And talking about the business of photography, one of the things that I notice a lot is that photographers struggle to get past that $75 or $100 price point. Why do you think you were able to do so, and how can other photographers do it?
Yeah, I suppose it's all about mindsets. I mean, even though I had my business over a 40-year period, there were times I had to challenge my mindset and say, yes, you've got to put your prices up. Yes, you've got to keep moving forward. You can't worry too much about the competition. You just form your own bubble and blow it up big. You're talking about that mindset. My 7x5-inch print used to be $95 many years ago, and I decided that I didn't want to sell any, and I decided that the best way was to put the price up. And so I thought, how much shall I put it up by? 100, 120, and I thought, damn it, I'm going to do it. I'm going to make it 145 for a 7x5. And I thought, that's going to do my head in, but I'm going to do it. It only took 4 to 5 days before I accepted it as my new normal. And it didn't bother me. In fact, no one ever bought a 7x5 anyway, so it didn't matter. But what it did mean was I'd progressed forward. So if I was able to put the price of my smallest print up, then I was able to put the price of my other prints up. And that's the way you have to come over it sometimes, get over it. It is just bit by bit, slowly, step by step.
For photographers who are getting started, what do you think that they're spending too much of their time and focus on where they shouldn't be?
Well, I think they should be, if you're starting new with anything, the best thing to do is get some education. And I was thinking about this morning, funnily enough, about that photographers don't learn about business. They don't learn about marketing. They just try and work it all out for themselves. It's actually all out there. But do it properly. Go to proper marketing, seminars. Go to pay for courses in business. Learn the business. The photography is the easiest part.
Yeah.
Everyone's a photographer, right? So what you've got to learn is the business aspects of it. And that's the most important thing. If you want to make money. Maybe you don't want to make much money. It just depends on each individual.
Yeah.
Not everyone wants to, and I think in the podcast that we did together a few months ago, you said that. You said, hang on, Bernie, I don't want to, maybe I'm not the one that wants to make $1 million a year in the industry. And so everyone's different. But if you're going in it to make money, then learn the business side. The photography is easy. Learn about selling, about pricing, about marketing, about those basic fundamentals. And that leaves a lot of pressure because you don't have to work it out so much for yourself.
You're the perfect person to ask this. If you were to pack up everything and move to an entirely new location today, what would be the first thing that you would do to start getting bookings?
Well, that's pretty straightforward, isn't it? We have Facebook.
Yeah.
Facebook is still gold. It's just amazing. And because I coach photographers all around the world, and because one of our major marketing, focal points is through Facebook, I know the results we're getting. I know the results. I spoke to a photographer yesterday who'd got 32 bookings in advance, right? 32 paid for next month through Facebook. So that's exactly what I do. I test the marketplace by using Facebook ads.
So why do you think for some photographers they feel like Facebook ads don't work? What do you think that disconnect is?
They probably do it incorrectly. They probably get too complicated with it. We have a simple process we follow with the ad. One thing we have found over the past 2 months is getting a pixel and getting a lookalike audience is working very well. So that's a starting point. And keep it simple.
Yeah, keep it simple.
And if you're going to put a photograph on there as part of your post or your ad, make it memorable. Photograph has to be memorable. The photograph's role is to stop people scrolling. So it has to be a wow photo. That's hard to do, right?
Yeah.
Nowadays. But that's one of the keys. If you can stop people scrolling, then they'll look on the timeline at your ad that, Facebook have put up there.
Just goes back to starting off at being a solid photographer.
It's all about keeping simple as well in some ways. It's very interesting. I was just on the Kodak stand and, they're starting to manufacture film in a big way now. 120 size, 35 mil size. Ektachrome, for goodness sake. I used to process Ektachrome in C31 chemicals to get the really bright, vibrant colors. Just went over to another stand and their canvas is done the old way, where you peel the emulsion off the print and then embed it on top of the canvas under pressure. And that's the way it used to be. That's the good old, real way of doing it, where you get real canvas texture coming through the print.
Wow.
So everything that used to be that I did 40 years ago is coming back. It's amazing.
I love it. Okay, my last question for you is, what is it that you love about coming to conventions or imaging?
This trade show is one of the best I've seen anywhere in my travels. I was at the New York one the end of last year. I've been to WPPI on more than one occasion. I've been to PPA many years ago, but this is just the best. It really is. I'm finding it difficult to leave this place. My wife keeps calling me and I'm busy. So it's fantastic.
So we'll just start super easy and just let me know who you are and what it is that you shoot.
Okay. We're the Blumes. We shoot primarily weddings, but also portraits. So seniors, newborns, headshots, and things like that.
We look like specialists on the outside. We try to look like wedding photographers by marketing through a wedding photography website, but then the newborn side of our business has its own website. So we're really in the background are generalists, but have discovered that gives a really nice diversification to any business and a nice stability to income throughout the year. But still that marketing, what you hear people say is true, is that you want to appear like a specialist to create that confidence in your clients.
I love it. Perfect. So my first question is, with so many new photographers, they get into photography and they focus on either the wrong thing or too much on something else. What have you found that new photographers spend too much time and energy focusing on?
I think a lot of the new photographers are focusing too much time on their social media following and trying to get likes and followers when they really should be focusing on their craft and the business side of things first.
Yeah, I think maybe we're just 1 year old enough to not fall within the millennial generation, so we can kind of shake our finger at them and pretend like we're the old wise sages. But really, that is true in that sort of millennial generation of just we're so accustomed to feeling like everyone is watching us, and we feel like the all important thing is to portray a certain kind of personality or something to the world and gain people's attention. And I think that's partly just naturally human. It's been said that the greatest human desire, but beyond just needing shelter and food, is to be seen and understood. And so it's like we have this inclination inside of us. It's just designed in, it's a bit biological. And then all of a sudden there's this technology, the social aspect, the social media that comes alongside it and just heightens it and makes it almost a dangerous thing. So I think if we're able to get past that, we've always said when it comes to social media that it's profitability over popularity. So you can definitely use social media in cool ways to communicate directly to people, to make real relationships, to kind of undergird the face-to-face stuff that you do outside of your office when you're not behind the computer and really meeting people. But you don't want to get caught up in just trying to compete with the personalities online or watching what the photographer across town is doing and letting your imagination run wild of how successful they must be. Because really behind the scenes, people are usually struggling and trying to paint a rosier picture on the outside. So just staying in your lane and just create, add value to people instead of trying to add value to yourself.
Wow, that was a lot deeper than I was expecting it to go right there. That was fantastic.
I always take the broad 50,000 foot view, and Eileen's like, practically what that means.
Punch it out.
There's many new photographers who, when they get into photography, they start charging $50, $75, $100, but then they struggle to break past that point. You two have broke past that point. Why do you think so many new photographers struggle with that?
Yeah, when you're competing based on price, there's always somebody who's cheaper than you are. So it's just kind of a race to the bottom. So you have to break out of that cycle, out of that market, and cater to a different kind of client who's looking for more, who's looking for that full client experience that you can work on delivering to them. And so then it's just a much smaller pool of competition when you're catering to those who are looking for that kind of brand, that luxury brand, that value.
I think it's fascinating when you start looking at business research and consumer psychology and these things, and you start to understand that there are different kinds of business structures. And there's a commodity type of business, and there's a service-oriented type of business or a luxury business. And a lot of us, when we're first getting into photography, we're accustomed to being consumers in a typical commodity business where we go into a store, we buy something, we kind of, even if we didn't go to business school, we know, they kind of mark it up 50% of its cost to the store, of its what do they call that? You mark up the basic markup. And so we realize that and we start to just follow those very general elementary rules that we have in the back of our mind, when really we don't take account of our costs as boutique luxury type of industry. And those costs are way beyond the paper that we print on, So if you're feeling a little bit guilty of I can't sell this print, this 8x10, for instance, this is a common thing with pricing 8x10s. I can't sell an 8x10 for more than $15. I mean, the paper costs nothing. I can mark the paper up and it's just a few dollars. But you haven't taken into account your marketing budget, you actually created the image. You're not, if Target prints it for them, they can print it for a few bucks, but they're just selling paper and they're selling your work. So instead of trying to profit these big box stores for your work, you have to really respect yourself enough to take account of those hours that you put in. How many, write it down, make a list. How many hours did you put into editing, into uploading, backing up, and creating that security for your client? And this is all, of course, if you're selling prints, but even just if you're starting out and you're doing shoot and burn, your travel expenses and not only your time directly behind the camera, but your time planning and emailing back and forth. All that goes into, you look at your numbers at some point and you realize, oh my gosh, I'm paying a lot of money for a very expensive hobby instead of being a profitable business or in any way. And the one thing that I just want to encourage photographers with, because I grew up extremely poor, it would not be an exaggeration to say just grew up very dirt poor. And I think that I had a lot of guilt about money or asking for money or doing well and succeeding financially. And what I've realized, though, is that if you don't price yourself correctly, that you will basically, your charity is that you're like giving discounts to people. Oh, I feel bad for them, they can't afford photography. I would never pay that much for photography, so let me give them a discount and be kind. And eventually you're so kind that you put yourself out of business. You can't help those people, and you can't help anyone else in the world, because a starving artist can't feed the hungry. If you can just succeed and serve people well, they are going to value you more because of the way you treat them. They're going to appreciate your prices. And with the resources and time that you gain, which you lack right now, you can take that and just give it away. You can do real charity to help real people, who need food, who need shelter, who need something much more desperately than they need pictures on their walls. So I feel like you can do so much as an artist. You have these superpowers. Don't squander them. Just charge what you're worth and be a force in the world as an artist to change it.
As time goes on, cell phones are getting better cameras. We're seeing computational photography and AI really make a big mark on in the world of photography. What do you see the future of photography as, and how can photographers make their mark stand out?
Yeah. If I can answer this one first.
Go for it.
Robots. We're all out of a job. It's over. Photography is done. So I would go ahead and look for a different job. just being honest. No, actually, in reality, I remember, because we've been in business for 12 years and seeing different technology come out, and it was, the camera with all the lenses where you can just take the picture and focus later and all these things. And I remember at the time having conversations with people like, manual racking focus and even using autofocus was quite an art if you're a portrait photographer and your subject's moving. Like, we spent years perfecting this art of focusing and getting sharp photos, and still only about, we were doing really well if 75% of our portrait photos were in good focus. And then all of a sudden technology like that comes along, or now I pick up my new Sony camera and it's like cheating. Like, I can't miss focus. The thing just locks onto the person's eyeball wherever they move. And I'm not afraid of that. I love that, because tools like, technology and tools are there to make our lives easier, to do the things that automation and AI could never do, which is that human spark and that creativity. And I think our ultimate job is to interact with other humans, our clients, to give them an experience, to connect with them on that human level, to help them feel something. Because ultimately, when portrait clients look back on their images, what makes those images valuable to them is not how tack sharp they are or how soft lit they are. They connect to the feeling that they had, and that's a memory. It reminds them of the feelings they had. So if you go into a portrait session and you don't give a great experience, and they walk away from that experience that was a pain, they're going to remember that when they look back at their portraits. And so I think all these tools and technology just give us freedom to just kind of take all of that stress off of our minds and focus on, what kind of image do we want to create here. You can light something however you want. You can make one scene look like a completely different scene. You give that image a different feel. You treat your client in a different way, and you bring out something that is a choice. And photographers are people who have to make choices and solve problems. And so that part of being an artist can never be taken away from us. I think the job can just become more fun the simpler the tools and technology become.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Okay, so last question here is just simply, what is it that you love about being at Imaging and other conferences?
I love being able to connect with other photographers, even the other speakers here. There's just so much knowledge to gain from each other. And when we do speak, I love hearing the light bulb moments from our students. And just, we've been doing this for so many years, so we think, oh, okay, this is probably just old news, but when we hear those light bulb moments from our students, they're like, oh my goodness, I never thought of it that way. And it just makes me feel good knowing that like through all the experiences that we've had, just the good and the bad, that it can be helpful to somebody else just starting out.
And I don't know how many years ago it was, 6, 7, 8 years. I'm so bad with chronology, but Imaging USA was the first conference that I walked into because that year it was in Atlanta, just about an hour or so from where we live. And I said, Eileen, I'll go check this out. And I just walked in, and I was blown away. I had no idea what I was walking into, because we had just spent 2 years trying to get our business up and going and thinking the rest of our lives is going to be isolated in the back room of our house staring at computers all the time. We're self-employed, and it's just kind of this lonely feeling. And then found out that there's community. There's community in an amazing industry in photography. And Imaging USA and PPA just really embody that, in the sense that they're this organization that's been around since photography was created, and they're pushing the art forward, but they're pushing photographers, the people, forward. And so that first conference that I walked into, not knowing what to expect, we met friends there who have become some of our closest friends to this day, a decade later. And not only friends, but partners who we've been able to add value to one another and move our businesses forward together. So it took away that fear of competition, and it really is something that is at the center of our lives, not only our business, and we wouldn't miss it for anything.
Why don't you just start off by telling me who you are and what it is that you shoot?
Okay, I am Eric Bern. I have a studio in Atlanta called Headshot Studio Atlanta, previously known as Eric Bern Studio for the first 40 years.
So having been in business for 40 years, what do you think is something that you see photographers now just spending too much of their time and attention focused on?
Ooh, that's a good question, because obviously if you're trying to make a career out of photography, your skills should be honed. You should have cameras that work, lights that work. Pretty important. Know what you're doing with them. But then you really got to get the business side of your brain working and figure out how you're going to make a living at it. So I would say that I've met a lot of younger photographers, very talented. I don't know how well they're doing in their careers, but most of them are part-time. And some of them that have branched into the few that I've known that branched into fuller time as a profession, have actually, you can hear in their discussion that they're really motivated by making money, because yes, it is a wonderful career, it's a fantastic career, but it's a bit more of a commoditized career than ever before. That's the change I've noticed in the last 45 years. So I would say spending more time on marketing and promotion, and getting your name out there, building relationships. That's where you got to spend the time if you want to keep enjoying all these fancy, expensive cameras.
And they seem to be getting more and more expensive every single year that we come out here. So a lot of photographers who are just breaking into photography, now it's very much take, just like a portrait session, for example. It's usually bundled as like an hour of time and like something as a deliverable.
Right.
So many photographers are stuck at like this $75 to $100 price point. Why do you think? How do you think they should break past that?
Well, so being in the profession for a long time again, I started somewhat the same way. However, from the very beginning, I always sold a product, and ultimately a product of some sort. My first photography was doing children's black and white, what we used to call environmental portraits. Now they're called lifestyle portraits. I would do those candid pictures like everybody, young people do and photographers do. But then I would sit at the person's home with black and white proof sheets and work my way through and show them samples of what they can look like and sell lots of beautiful, larger wall portraits and items that they had to get multiple copies of. And the product is where I made my career. The digital world changed everything, obviously, because we had no choice but to sell the product or give our negatives away, and that made no sense at all. Nowadays, everybody wants digital files. That's one of the big challenges for probably most photographers. You really have to think in terms of getting beyond, see what's out there. We're at this convention that has 100,000 different items you can sell. You're selling a product and a service. That's what makes it such an unusual profession. You're selling your time and your talent, and you're also selling actual imagery, and then you turn the imagery into something that's a product that you can touch and feel. You're going to make more money. And I know this for a fact because I've specialized now in headshots, and I'm not making as much money, but my pleasure has gone up tremendously because I'm at a different stage in my career where I can afford to spend more time with my clients, and I love my clients, and I have so much fun with them, and I learn so much from them. But even at that, there's people want you to do a good job for them, and they don't really know what they want. And the more that you can offer them, the more you can sell them, the more you're going to produce income from it.
Right.
So it could be either more images or more products. Best combination is trying to mix them all together. So it's just offering more and selling more. And I don't know, breaking out that $100, you go to lots of seminars and learn from the best photographers and photography coaches. I know a very good one. His name's Bernie Griffiths, and he's the best. I know this firsthand.
Yeah.
He'll teach you all this in depth.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
If you were, right now, you're based in Atlanta, if you were tomorrow, pick up everything and move to LA to start all over again, what would be the first thing that you would do to get clients in the door?
To get the clients? Well, I can't really tell you that I was a true marketer of photography. When I started, I was fortunate. At 17 years old, I did my first photography of relatives. Then it became their friends, and then it became their friends. And before I knew it, I had a small business. The word of mouth is unbelievable. If you went to a new city, I can't be the expert in that field. Okay, I could tell you that I know that the world of social media has changed all of that. People are finding each other on Instagram, and there's a million variations of ways people find one another today. But I think...
Let me rephrase the question.
Yeah.
If you found that all of February, you woke up tomorrow, your calendar was empty, what would be the first thing that you would do to get to bookings?
To back to bookings again? In my case, I'd go to my client list and start, promoting the client list. Yes.
Okay.
So I did start this new career in headshots, and I have had 38 years in Atlanta, so I do have a decent following from that. But really most all this new work I'm doing in my headshot work has been, I'd say 80% new clients that have come to me because there's a need for headshots. So I find that being in the side of the side of the profession that has demand is where I always try to move my career. And there weren't nearly the numbers of talented photographers out there in the earliest days, and it just naturally grew. I've really never spent much money on advertising. Almost everything was personal relationships, and the word-of-mouth referrals are fantastic.
think probably a lot of people watching might think that that's unusual, but that doesn't mean that it's not a good thing. I'd much rather do that instead of paying for, hundreds of dollars a month for, all these different digital platforms, so I think that's great. So my last question for you is, what do you love about coming to conferences and imaging?
Well, that's changed too, because I think I was maybe 19 when I went to my first PPA convention in Chicago, and I went to quite a few of them over the years. But I take 5 or 7 year breaks between, and it's just interesting to me how much the technology, of course, is turned upside down and changed. The photographers are the same. They're all mostly, what I find, they're all outgoing people. They're friendly, they're engaging, and obviously that must be a part of the photography business. People have to like people. That's your subject matter. If you're a people photographer, if you don't like people, do not get into this business. But other than that, the work, the style has changed to a degree, but yet at the same time, I don't feel it's evolved a huge amount in terms of what's the creativity of it all. I mean, we just came from an art museum this morning, and I was looking at this unbelievable collection of just brilliantly creative artists that were creating things for their own personal reasons, but maybe some of these things would be marketable, but they're artists, they're not doing it to sell it to the next person the same thing. They're just doing it to create that piece of art. And that's the one area where the professional photographer, we got to deal and work for clients, create images that are going to sell, but at the same time breaking all those molds. I find that the molds are still pretty restrained within the professional photographer circles, but I think the greatest amount of change has been the last 10 years because of digital. That's just opened up so many more styles and changes and capabilities of the types of things that can be done with highly sensitive sensors and just the Photoshop applications. That's changed the industry a lot.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. Okay.
All right, so just nice and easy. Just tell me who you are and what it is that you shoot.
Well, I am Candace, and I do mostly family portraits and some weddings, some corporate events.
Okay, so one question that I love to know from all photographers, just because everybody is so, everybody has a different answer. What do you think most new photographers spend too much time and energy focused on?
I don't know about most photographers, but I think for me, I spent a lot of energy on just stuff like gear, like cameras, and because I was just fascinated by how the cameras worked and how all the technical stuff worked. And I don't know if that's just me as just a gear person or what, but I think that if I focus more on how to get things right in the camera and how to compose a shot and all of that, that I wouldn't have been as focused on the gear, and I would have been a better photographer now, because my focus would have been just more streamlined toward what I want to do. So
you told me that the gear doesn't make the photo. It's the photographer then, huh?
Yeah. It helps, but it's not the most important thing.
So once somebody gets this technical, competency of how to use their camera, the next step for them is always well, how can I make money with my camera? And then they seem to always get stuck at this $75 or $100 price point. What do you think the secret is to breaking past that?
I mean, I think for me, it was just the decision just not to charge $75. It's easy, when you're trying to get the people coming in, you're like, I'll do it for free, I'll do it for, $10, I'll do it for $5, just let me shoot you and get, some experience. But once you got some experience and you got pictures that you can show and prove yourself a little bit, then just don't do it. Just charge, something more, and then when people start coming in, charge a little bit more. And then when people start coming in for that, charge a little bit more until nobody's coming in.
And then you reached it.
You're right. And then to scale back a little bit.
If you were tomorrow to move to, let's say, LA, if you were to move tomorrow to LA, brand new business, what would be the first thing that you would do to get new clients?
I probably would network more, just kind of get out there and just see like who I can find that's in that area. Like I do a lot of family photos, so I'll try to meet a lot of moms. Maybe I have a kid myself, so join like play groups and things like that, just to try to just meet people and talk to people and see like, you know, where can I go to meet other people like you know, and just network and show what I do, you know, not just say like, oh yeah, you know, I kind of do photography. Like, no, say proudly like, yeah, I do photography and this is what I do. Like, oh, let me show you some of the stuff I've done, and just, you know, put myself out there and not just be too shy about it.
So one of my last questions here for you is, we're kind of at like this weird technological point in photography where, you know, cell phones have great cameras and we see like, you know, AI making incredible photos as well. What do you think the future of photography looks like, and how do we as new photographers stand out?
I think people just have to adjust. I mean, there's always going to be some shift in technology that makes things different, but people are always going to need photography for some reason. I mean, taking a selfie of you and your family is a lot different than, you know, having a professional come in and pose you and just take those professional pictures. And, you know, you're not probably going to shoot your own wedding. And, you know, there's always going to be a need for photographers. And if cell phones get to the point where, you know, they can take like professional pictures, then maybe it'll make it easier for photographers to just use a cell phone for their photography. So I don't think that the industry is going to change as much as people fear that it will, just because it's always changes. People just have to adapt, just like with the change from film to digital. People thought that everything was going to go downhill. It's just people adapt and do what, you know, is best for the time. So
I can't wait till the day that I can just bring a cell phone to a wedding and then shoot the whole thing. I'm so excited for that day, and I am like ready with open
just
arms.
come up with it.
Yeah, exactly. It's gonna be great. I can even get some selfies like in the same photo with everybody.
Yeah.
So then my last question is, this is your first time at Imaging. This is your first photo conference. What has been your favorite part of the whole experience?
I think meeting, because like I said, I like meeting people. So I think meeting everybody, meeting you, meeting like some of the people that I just sit in a class with and strike up a conversation with. Like, it's just been really nice to see everyone who has the same interest, and, you know, that you can talk freely with about photography and see what they do and try to, you know, form, you know, bonds that, you know, may last until next year or for years to come. So, I mean, I just like the atmosphere overall.
It
just
is
like
fun.
it. Yeah.
It is fun.
It was very fun.
So just short introduction, let me know who you are and what it is that you shoot.
So, hey, I'm Lucy Dumas, and I photograph kids and families. Been full-time for 38 years. Woohoo! And I also do business coaching for photographers who want to have their own 38 years of success, or 1,000 years, if, you know, if they learn how to live that long.
Who knows? The next 100 years could be crazy. Could be 1,000 years. The first 1,000-year business. That would be amazing. So there are many new photographers, and I'm sure that you've encountered many new photographers. Where do you think that they spend too much of their time and energy focused on?
I think the next shiny object and trying to find the answer can be one. I think where people should be focused on is education. There's a danger in buying too many toys and spending all your money doing that and not getting educated, not hiring people, joining memberships, we're at a PPA convention, you know, not getting involved in our profession. So, and maybe trying to market just in your chair and not having to get out and meet people.
I like that a lot. If you were to start over again today, from the beginning, say that you were to move to New York City, what would be the first thing that you would do to get new business, get new clients?
So before I moved, I would find all the charity events and locate the ideal events that would be drawing my clients, and I would set up donation programs.
Interesting. How does that work?
So most of because I do high-end photography where most people invest $3,000 to $10,000. So if I find a charity, I have an itchy ear. I find a charity where it's a high ticket price and it's mostly women, and I donate right now $500 or $700 gift certificate that covers a session and enough to buy maybe an 8x10 with a little left over, but I don't feature the 8x10. And then I get the contact info from the person that won it, and I call them up, and selling is my superpower. So once I get them into my trusted advisor position and have the phone call and then get them into consultation and then photograph in a way that gives me more to sell, and then my sales room strategies with I have a couple of things that are my secret sauce that make all the difference in the world. You know, they can buy 3 to 8 wall portraits easily.
Yeah.
So, but first it has to be the right place, and I have to set up a big display, and then they have to be willing to give me the contact info, because otherwise nothing happens.
So with selling, having averages of like $3,000 to $10,000, you have broken past this artificial barrier that so many new photographers are faced with. Mm-hmm. Feeling maybe guilty of charging $75 or $100, and that there's no way that they could charge more than that. How have you found that you've been able to break past that barrier?
Well, first off, I make a living at this, so I have to charge enough to have the lifestyle I want. And I am not capable of being high volume. And if you're charging low and you do your numbers, you have to do 500 sessions to my 50.
Yeah.
So there's the actual practical money. But also, I find that the more people pay, the more they respect what I do, the more they invest in the clothing, in being there on time, and the whole process is better for them, and they value the portraits more. And also, I'm a huge believer in printing our work, because they're not going to do it, and if they do, they're not going to go to a professional photo lab and get it done right. So I'm so passionate about knowing the worth of what I do for people that I want them to have great memories of the experience, and then I want them to have legacy portraits that will live in their families forever.
1,000 years. Another
1,000 years.
Yeah.
We're back to 1,000 years. Yeah. The other thing is, from the, like, not the big grand, I believe in what I do because it changes people's lives, but the selfish reason, people who pay very little are the worst clients. People that give me $7,000 complain less, cooperate, they're on time. People who pay me, let's say $300, and they get all the files, they expect a $3,000 job. But they can't get it at that because I don't have time to meet with them in person and have those phone calls and plan it and make sure they understand everything. It would be, you want it, you got it, I'll meet you here, here's the files. Also, not giving that kind of service, you're not sitting with them while they see it and enjoying it and learning what clients love. And it's an experience when I sit in the sales room with them. And so if there's an objection, it's handled right there.
That's a great tip.
Yeah.
Yeah. That kind of brings me to my next question, which is kind of about the future of photography. So obviously, a lot has changed in the last 10 years or so with the transition from film to digital. You walk around this trade floor, and there are companies that wouldn't have been here 10 years. There couldn't have been here 10 years.
Oh, lots of them. Yeah.
So what do you, with cell phones that have better cameras than ever, AI, computational photography, what do you think the future holds for photography, and how can we as photographers stand out?
So I think the future for professional photographers is that we really have to sell ourselves. We have to create the experience. There's always, like, I did a Google search on photographers in just my zip code. So this is my map. Can you see it? Within 3 mile radius, how many photographers do you think there are?
Oh, man.
That I found on Google in San Diego? 887.
887. Oh, wow.
So people are buying me. They're not buying the finished product, especially with digital, because they're not even having a finished product. They're going to lose it. Those USB things, can't even put them in an Apple laptop anymore. But they're buying the experience of me and what I offer, and caring about them and getting them to deeply fall even more in love with the people that are the subjects. So, PPA is really big on bringing back the concept of selling printed. It's called the print movement.
Yeah.
And I'm like, the big the print movement. So, and I think the future is whatever anybody individually chooses to do in their own future. But because now there's just no barrier for people being able to have decent photographs, to have a profession at this, we have to do much more. And that's the excitement.
My last question for
Okay.
you. What's your favorite thing about coming to imaging?
Oh my gosh. I'm always so overwhelmed with how much I love this industry and how much I love photographers. And especially PPA, it's a not-for-profit, heavily volunteer-driven organization. So it's a whole trade show full of, or not just trade show, but it's a whole convention center full of givers and people who risk and people who love people. And I love seeing somebody that I've known since I started, and they've got their ribbons on, and maybe they've got a lot of other awards and things, and I get to call them my friend, and someone's like, oh my gosh, and I'm like, hey.
Yeah.
So it's the relationships, and I just always leave so freaking grateful and proud that I've managed, along with colleagues, to have a viable business, and it's the friends, it's all of it. It's the toys in the trade show. It's everything, and
There's a lot of them too.
yeah. And now that I'm coaching, then it's opportunities to meet new people, so that I can help them and inspire them, and share with them people that. Anyway, it's all good.
How
It's
to
just
make
all
a
good.
1,000-year business.
1,000 years lasts for 1,000
yeah.
years. $1 million business that lasts for 1,000 years.
There you go.
I like it.
that.
Let's go with those zeros.
You know what was fun is that when I went down to imaging, I was there for 4 days and 3 nights, and in those 4 days and 3 nights, I met more photographers in that short period of time than I have, I think, ever being a photographer. If I counted all the photographers who I've met in person, I could probably count them on 3 hands. And I don't know. What I'm saying is that it's not many, but going out to a place like this where there's essentially located a bunch of photographers was so refreshing. And while I was editing this, I could see that I could feel, I guess, that I had a smile on my face as if I was back there again. I felt that feeling of being surrounded by, being supported by other photographers who knew what I was going through, who knew, some of the struggles of the industry, who knew some of the exciting things that are coming for photography, who just had this great outlook. And it's just so refreshing. It is just so much fun. So, I gotta say, if you ever get the chance to go to a photography convention, in my case, this was Imaging USA, please go. Please. On top of the education that they have and these workshops that you can sit in on, and not only hear from other professional photographers, but, learn and meet people face to face, you just walk around this trade show floor and then you feel the sense of camaraderie, even though there's so many people. There's so many people. You know that you're all the same in some way. And that makes it so easy to talk to people. Find out who they are and what it is that they like. And what was really cool was that, there's a lot of photographers who I look up to. And I saw them just walking around, just, regular people on the show floor. And on top of that, I got to meet some of you listeners. As you can hear, I interviewed Candace here. I got to meet Rita from the group as well, several others, and it was just so much fun. And I got a bunch of selfies with y'all. I truly had a great time. And having never been to a photography convention before, I got to tell you, I'm glad that this was my first, and it's not going to be my last. I'm going to go, and I'm going to make this a regular thing because this is our industry. You know, it's hard. Sometimes we work from home. And feeling that connection that we have with other photographers is so important to kickstart your creativity, to kickstart your, your imagination and your excitement again, And that is what is so fun. So that was it from this episode. I really hope that you enjoyed it. I really hope that you took away a ton from it. And if you did, I would love to hear your biggest takeaways within the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group, because I know that there's bound to be a bunch. So that is it. Until next week, I want you to get out. I want you to shoot. I want you to do more. I want you to make more. And I want you to make do with the gear that you have, because I promise you that it's better than you expect. All right. I'll talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Beginner Photography Podcast. If you enjoy the show, consider leaving a review in iTunes. Keep shooting, and we'll see you next week.